Hopefulness 2.0, day 29. Ooh. Oops. So despite how lazy I was being yesterday, I still ended up being reasonably productive. Made some stock. First and foremost, I cooked up some of my soup stuff. So I had leftover can of chicken noodle soup, and condensed, and then some cream of chicken. Obviously, there's a bunch of dishes in here that I gotta take care of at some point. But so that was like my main meal for the day. Cut up a piece of the chicken that I've got in the fridge, and then oh shit! Speaking of chicken, might as well grab a piece. Screw it. Screw it. Booyah. Anyway. So I cut up a piece of that, and then had the cream of chicken and the chicken noodle soup, and drink a little extra water. Cooked those up, and it was pretty good. Like, throwing some extra seasonings and stuff so that those could really mingle together and taste even better. Oh yeah, I have to wait for that. I was gonna go ahead and do some sours of starting, because today I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work through the process of it. I'm going to keep the heat up. I'm also going to make some more pat of choux again today, because I really liked that. It was, it's like, it's not an overly difficult process. I mean, it's a bit rough on the shoulder, especially because, like, when you first throw in those eggs, so like in the beginning it's not too difficult when it comes to mixing the water and the milk and the salt and even the flour, and it's like then it starts to get kind of rough because you're slapping it together and you're trying to find this whole you're trying to get it all worked right, so I guess it's time to start drilling and hammer drilling on some shit now. It's just after 11. So I'm gonna get my starter ready. I'll start doing it here in a minute when the water settles that I just put in the water pitcher, and the room should hopefully warm up a bit. But before I do that, I'm gonna I gotta clean out some dishes and stuff. So that's gonna be like the first main thing that I'll be doing today, of course. And then I'll help warm up the room and whatnot. Turn on the fan, why not? But between now, so I've got a couple phone calls to deal with today. So yesterday, I was like, oh yeah, that one company probably gave up on me. Well, then they didn't. Hit me up with a message on Indeed. And I want to have a phone call, so they called me at 12:30. I assume it's going to be like 10-30 minutes tops. And then I got a phone call with my therapist later at 3:30. And at least I'm making some progress in one way or another. And the end of the month is coming, so I'm going to have to pay rent soon, which sucks. because I'm getting down to the last $5,000 that I have. I mean, I'm already kind of there, so it's whatever. But still so good. But yeah, so that conversation will be coming. And like the pâte à choux and the sourdough. Now, because here's the thing about sourdough. So I was rewatching Claire's video, taking notes to get my recipe down. Written in a way that I can understand, that will be easy enough for me to follow, so they don't have to keep running back and forth in there, looking at the video and stuff. And I mean, it is a long process, and because of that, it's an all-day process pretty much, because either you feed the starter and you let it do its thing naturally. I mean, you kind of have to either way. Or you do effectively the Levant version, where you take a little bit of the starter and then you add it, and keep it in a warm spot, whatever it may be. It's like, I'm thinking this oven is a pretty good oven overall, because it definitely will go to 500 degrees. But at the same time, it seems like it could be set to be a pretty low temperature as well, maybe even 100, 125. Because when I start preheating it, it starts at 100, and then it starts to kick up beyond that. And so, I think in order to help with fermentation, generally you probably want it on a little lower room temperature side. But if it can do 100, that's not a bad thing. Then I can get, I gotta clean up some stuff anyway. And then I can put it into an alternative container, and that's heat proof and all that stuff, and put it in there at a low temperature. Let it do its thing, because like 100, 125 isn't super bad, especially in an oven, and especially when it's more like in the middle, because it's just mostly getting radiant heat, and it's such a low enough temperature that although yes, it will stay really warm, like 100 degrees isn't 100 degrees Fahrenheit isn't really that bad. I mean, yeah, if you have, a piece of glassware or something that stays 100 degrees for a while, it can get relatively hot and potentially burn you. But, our bodies internally are 98.6. And that's why when we feel something that is around that temperature, it's like, oh, this is really warm. Instead of, ow, this hurts. Unless you're outside, it's miserable. But that's a whole nother process and a whole nother difference. So, yeah. And I got it in my head to do it last night, thinking that it wouldn't take as long as it did, because I'm a dummy, and also that it wouldn't have been. It would. So I made some stock with all the bones and stuff. If you can see, just let it sit out so it could dry up. I mean, granted, it's not all shit. Fuck! Just knocked over the water. I had to do laundry today too, because I didn't do it yesterday while it was raining. Fuck, man. Oh shit. I just realized that the water went towards my bag of flour. Don't want that. One second. It sucks. I'm gonna wash down this anyway, so, but still sucks that I just emptied out virtually all of the water that was in there. Yay. But, yeah, so cooked up those bones. Like, my pot's of a reasonable size, but it was still not enough room. I see the point of a stock pot and the sizes that they are. Because one, you want to be able to submerge everything for one, but you want to be able to have quite a bit of additional surface above everything being submerged. You want at least 2 to 4, maybe 5 or 6 inches. And the reason why is, one, some of the water is just going to steam off anyway. But two, in the process of it cooking, you're going to start getting that scum on the top. And, you know, there's just various impurities and stuff that's just going to float to the top. And they're relatively small, so they're going to go through a sieve. So you want to be able to get rid of those so that you can just have, you know, the pure stock that you're going to have. And by the way, it smelled fucking great. And I mean, I didn't have full-on mirepoix. I just had some carrots and that small onion. Because it's like, I'm not going to probably make meatloaf for a bit. Why not just do the stuff with the stock? So that's what I did. And that took about... So I started the whole process around 9 o'clock, and I ended close to 2. And it should have gone on longer. Even though I've seen videos and stuff talking about, you know, the length of time and everything, it's like, I get it now. Having done it, it makes sense. You want a bigger pot, even if you don't have nearly as many bones and stuff as, what they're doing. It's like, it still takes up a lot of space. And you want them all to be able to kind of freely move about inside the stock and, you know, just extract as much flavor from each of them as you want. And skim off all that stuff off the top, and then once it's all said and done, then it's much easier to handle the whole thing. Taking out all the bones and stuff, and then straining it and whatnot. And I strained it last night, and this is what was remaining after I cleaned out quite a bit. And, then I put them in 2 containers that I had to wash because I didn't have any clean containers. Now, I had incorporated some of the older drippings and the like from previous chicken cooking moments, if you will, because it was all in one container. And I just scraped it all in there after, I had filtered and everything. And, well, not after I had filtered, but after, so I hadn't filtered yet. I just got everything, as many bits as I could out with the slotted spoon I've got here. And, because I don't have a spider or anything of that nature, or any other kind of sieve, and this thing is big enough that it don't fit into the pot itself. And plus, they can potentially sink, so you'd still need to actually pour over it anyway. So I dumped in the rest of the stuff. I let that cook down a bit, because it had some old stocky gelatinized and some fats and stuff like that. And then when I was like, all right, I'm pretty much ready to go to bed, So I filtered it, over the sieve into 2 containers, and let them sit room temp, because room temp in here is relatively cold. I mean, it was like maybe upper 50s last night, tops, probably the lower 50s. And yeah, so they cooled off, and I just put them in the fridge before I, got up. I mean, just after I got up. Anyway, whatever. I'll get some water. I'm gonna start with this. Yeah, see, there's like when I put them in the fridge, the fat tops weren't really all that impressive, if you will. But now the fat's, starting to solidify. It's looking more and more like a fat cap, if you will. Let's move you out of the way here real quick. Back. Trying to think. If I should do, well, I think I'll just do what I normally do for the time being. Dump some out. Once I get the cleaning stuff, because I fed this last night before I went to bed. What I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'll feed it now, and then since I got the heaters running, I'll try to turn on the oven in a little bit. But when I'm done here, I'm gonna start washing dishes. That's gonna heat up the room a bit too, and so that'll help with the process. And then, oh shit, I put too much water in here. Fuck. Oh well. And 150 it is. Let's do 75 and 150 and 75. So maybe I won't do what I was thinking of doing. I'll just. Oh shit! I forgot to. Fuck. See. Well, it doesn't matter now. I've already started this part. See, I'm already getting distracted. Not doing it in the way that I want to do in the order. So I don't know. Maybe this is a bad sign for today. I'm not sure. We'll see. But it's whatever. So let's just pour the water in there and then mix it up, because it gets a lot easier to mix that way. But it's whatever now. I don't know why I was so dainty with that one. Yeah, I'm gonna have to dump out part of this later anyway, because if you'll see in a second, I'll wash that later. Like, that's where it's at now. It's pretty far up the top because I screwed up with the volumes. So, whatever. Yeah, since I learned about pouring the water in first from Claire's video about sourdough starter and the like, I was like, oh, that's smart. At least it's going down. But, I mean, I'm still going to work on sourdough today anyway, so. I didn't let them proof last time in room temperature, and that's also something I put on the recipe in my phone. So I use Google Keeps as a means of recipe, like instructionals. and I use check boxes so that like as each one that I've done, I can just kind of put them away. So like for the spaghetti sauce, that's the first one I ever put into Google Keeps, and it's just all these things that you put together all at once, and then you can turn on the heat and whatever and just let it simmer for however long. So it's super simple. And then I put in another one. And I was like, oh, hey, I need to kind of break these down into sections to figure out, like certain things need to happen first, and then certain indicators need to happen, and so on and so on and so on. And so I've effectively rewritten the recipe, if you will, to suit a way that works for me. Because I'm just watching it on a video. Oh man. Alright. Let's pretty much stir it up. I'm gonna grab scrape you off. Cool. It's relatively clean, surprisingly. But no matter. And then I'm just glad that there's very little paper towels left over that were hit by the water, instead of being a giant roll that was nice and new or something. That would have sucked. I don't know, maybe I'm doing too much today. I'm not sure. We'll find out. But I'm hopeful anyway. Put you up here. Cover you up, let you do your thing. But go ahead and fill you since you just I just disrespected you. Dumping all your clean, crisp water onto the countertop. Yeah, it's interesting. Living here by myself, I really want to continue doing this. So while I'm hopeful for this whole job situation being, because I think the pay is only like $18 an hour. It's still better than anything I've made before in the past, and if it's a full-time job, which I believe it is, it would pay for the space. It wouldn't be 3 times as much, but it would pay for it. It wouldn't really put me in a position to, do anything like get a car or anything for a while, but it's a stepping stone. And I'm running out of meds, so I gotta get those soon. Probably get them tomorrow. Oh, man. And there's the other company that hasn't responded back. They called me on Wednesday last week. Then sent me an email. And I'm like, I'm not going to answer phone calls if I don't know if they're coming. That's just how I work now. It's like I don't get this mentality where we have to be at everybody's beck and call just because we have cell phones. It's like, schedule a time with me, please. I've told you what my time frame is. While I may be available during those times, I'm not available all the time during those times. That's just the window in which I'm available. And you might say, well, why aren't you available earlier or whatever? It's like, well, because I don't want to be. And I don't need to be. they might be like, well, if this person isn't available until noon, how are they going to work for us if it's going to be earlier than that? Well, I'll change when I have that job. So it's whatever. And I didn't need to worry about calling up storage unit because on Sunday they sent me a receipt for vacancy. I was like, oh, okay, so they went by and they saw that it was empty or something, so that's cool. Um, yeah, it's whatever. So that's gonna work itself out, ideally. Um, oh man, but it's whatever. Ooh, it's kind of puffy. Hmm. Puffy yet still slightly crispy. Oh yeah, so I ate the rest of my my lemon curd and my pastry cream. Like those were so fucking. I was just eating on them all day yesterday, which was kind of the whole point. I mean, I wasn't gonna be making anything else to incorporate with them. I can do that maybe tomorrow or something, but I was just really surprised at how good they were. And then at one point, toward the evening, I was like, what happens if I mix them together? It was so good. Like it just balanced each other out, and like you still got there was like waves crashing under your tongue of different flavors and sensations. You know, there's the biting, piercing acidity from the lemon tart, and there was this sweet, sort of subtle, more eggy. Because I mean, they're both pretty eggy, but like the more eggy flavor of the pastry cream, and they're just kind of like in this weird, almost competition for your for your attention. It was so good. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna eat the rest of this shit today. It's so fucking good, man. Oh man, it's nice to finally be proud of something that I've done. Like, really is. I'm not usually proud of anything that I do. Um, it's the create. It's the curse of any creator of any kind, and we're all creators of some kind. But like, when I go back and I listen to like old recordings that I've done, I'm not really proud of those things. Um, Maybe in the moment when I'm done, sometimes I feel that way. It depends on what it is that I'll be honest though, most of the time in recordings, I don't feel that way. When I'm recording myself, I don't feel proud of my recording. Um, if, however, I've taken something that somebody else has done and kind of created something from it, sometimes I feel that way. Sometimes I feel the pride. Um, sometimes I feel like I've done a good job. Just recently, like I said before, I recorded this Old Spice parody because I was like, why not? I hadn't done it in a while. I'm not really proud of it though. It's funny, but I mean, it's not really anything. Um, but in this case, with these 2, 3, 4, 5 experiments in the last couple weeks, there was the lemon tart, there was the pastry cream, there was the pâte à choux, there was the sourdough, and then there was the banana bread. I mean, all of them turned out so good. Sure, the sourdough still wasn't as good as it could have been, but there was definitive improvement between the first and the second. Um, like, night and fucking day. And obviously, what I used to make the sourdough helped, and my understanding of the sourdough after the fact, and all these other things. And now that I have the Dutch oven, I can maybe even get to the point where it's a true success. And sure, this is me starting up. It's me beginning a thing. But it's kind of also a restarting of a thing, too. It's, in 2010, when I first started playing with video editing, I kind of had similar feelings. But here's the thing. I wasn't ever really I wasn't creating my own thing in some way or another. I mean, yes, the final product was my creation. But the creations that I was making wasn't a recipe from ground up. It was just me kind of freeballing shit. And that's kind of how I ended up throughout the whole process. Not to mention, most of the successful feelings in my brain weren't so much about the product itself that I had finished, but the act of understanding like the video editor or the audio editor that I was using. Here, though, somehow, some way feels more substantial. Like, yeah, 10 years ago, when I was living on my own, and, longer than that now, but in 2010, 2011, I had just been starting to kind of cook before I finally ended up. Like, when I was living by myself in Texas, that was when I started to cook. I didn't really understand beforehand. And while YouTube existed at that point, it wasn't much of a thing. If there were instructionals or anything of that nature, they were so few and far between, you wouldn't have likely known about them unless somebody had told you about them. Like the first instructional that I knew of from YouTube, I think before I finally actually left Texas, was Khan Academy. And that was before it became a website and curated, and it was like super structured and all this stuff. It was just him kind of, he was getting to that point, but that was about it as well. So really the only way I could have done any kind of cooking understanding was through a cookbook or through recipes online or something like that, and I have to find those, find the right one and whatnot. These last 10 years have been amazing for understanding how to cook. I've been on the internet since the internet was a thing, kind of. Give it, a 3-year period where I wasn't ever on the internet. And the first day that I was ever on the internet, like literally on the internet, using it, was literally the day that my dad died. And me and my mother were on it for like 6 hours. And it was on AOL, with a dial-up, and we had to use somebody else's code in order to even access the internet. And it was nothing compared to what it is today. I mean, it was nothing what it was compared to 4 years later. So in the last 20 years, I've seen the internet change, not only just drastically, but rapidly. And there's a lot of good to it. And when it came to instructionals and understanding of things, I've learned a lot about how to cook in the last several years. And definitely in the last couple more, because, I was in this process of like, I'm going to start learning how to cook. And, it's like even before then, when I was living at the sober living, and even before then, when I was living on my own, sort of, but not really actually on my own. I was living with, other folks from the. It was the first place I lived in, and off being homeless, which I guess is why I called it on my own, even though it wasn't. I was living in the living room. So I started cooking then. That's when I got. That's when I got this. I'm keeping this as long as possible, even though it's still not necessarily the best. Because it still works. It still works well. And, I mean, maybe some care could have been taken for it. And I tried it first. But it still does the job. And that's important. And then I got this bad boy. This is the second major investment, if you want to call it. I got this one when I was living at the sober living in the apartment. Because, and the reason why was because the only pot we could use of any size was the pot that my roommate had, and then I inadvertently broke the handle on it because it was not that great, but he had it for a long time, and when the handle broke, I felt bad, he felt bad, but he was at least understanding of the situation because it broke while using it the way it should have been used. It's not like I was fucking around with it or something, And I even offered to replace it, and he's, obviously it was this, sentimental thing, so it's hard to replace something like that, but, like, for the last 10 years and some change, like, cooking has been, hell, 15, cooking has been kind of this through line of things that has been going on in my life, and it's, the funny thing is that it's one of the things I look forward to when I can't do it. If that says anything. Or when things make it difficult. When I was living in the last place and I stopped cooking because the kitchen was just a goddamn mess all the time. It didn't matter how much I tried to clean it. My roommate's mother, she would go in there, she would do some kind of cooking thing or whatever, and it was just a fucking mess after she was done. And yeah, this is a mess. I wouldn't want to do this to anybody. This is why I don't want, but this is nothing compared to what she, that is the starting point to where she would often leave stuff. This is just me, I was tired and lazy and whatnot, and it's not something I would do on a regular basis. But I'm also not with anybody. I'm not living with anybody. I'm aware of the people that are around me and the fact that other people, well, rather, there's nobody around me, so I don't have to worry about that thing. But if I was living with somebody, I would be much more conscientious about that stuff. But at the same time, I'm glad I'm not living with anybody because it's giving me the opportunity to be a little bit more experimental with my own skills. It's giving me breathing room to make the mistakes that I need to make and to make the adjustments that I need to make as time goes on. And to try to find, my own way of doing things. And like I said before, whenever I was in a position where I couldn't, or it was otherwise extremely difficult to cook, I was always thinking about it. And one of the series, the things that I binge more than anything else is cooking videos. When I'm watching stuff, especially on YouTube. And I have a better overall understanding of things now. Used to be when I would make Hamburger Helper, which was the first time I ever really did any cooking. I wouldn't brown my meat because I didn't know what I was doing. It was always gray. Always. I didn't know that I needed to cook down the water, which was why it was still gray, because that was basically the color of the meat. And then once the water's done and there's that remaining fat, it's effectively going to fry in the fat. And now, that's when it starts to get the Maillard reaction. It starts to taste really good. It looks great. And then when you start incorporating all the other stuff, then it's like, oh my God, you've made this amazing fucking food. I didn't understand that. for the fucking longest. I didn't understand until literally years ago, a couple years ago. You know, now I'm trying to make fucking sourdough. Like, I made banana bread and it was great. And I'm like, what the fuck? I can make banana bread? The last time I tried to make banana bread, it sucked. Like, yeah, I can do box mixes and shit. That's not a problem. But that's not where I want to stop. I don't want to stop it. I want to make it. But I mean, you know, circumstances permitting, of course. Because right now, it's not really wise for me to go out and buy a big old box of fucking chocolate. Or, you know, a bag of baker's chocolate or whatever. To make brownies and shit. And I'm trying to make stuff that's like... I mean, pâte à choux, what is it? It's kind of... It's a little superfluous for what it is. But it's also a nice challenge. A challenge I'm willing to approach. I might try to make a savory version. The garlic powder and paprika. Maybe a little onion powder. But it'd have to be really small in quantities. I have to rewatch Claire's video when she added some stuff. But she added like cayenne and some other things to it when she was making the gougere with the cheese in it. And I mean, it's a whole process. But it's an interesting process. And while it's challenging physically, as well as, you know, just trying to understand spatial and time constraints, you know, and that's part of cooking that is a positive challenge for me, wherein, yeah, I have to have time management. And even though you would think with time management, especially my level of time management being as bad as it is, that you probably wouldn't want to do it, it is kind of something I want to do. Now, do I want to become some fucking, you know, culinary artist where, you know, my food looks fucking, you know, gorgeous and I'm making, you know, fucking flooded cookies and shit? Probably not. But I mean, if it's done right, it'll look good. And that's kind of part of it. I mean, it's funny because, like, I wanted to pick up the saxophone at some point, and I wanted to pick up some other thing, and, like, you know, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist, and I wanted to draw, and you know, I was picking that up from my cousin who was an artist, and I was really fascinated by his work, and so I started learning from that, and I started drawing, and it was getting better, but then that kind of stopped. And I've always wanted to be creative of some kind. And I'm starting to understand that this may be the realm. Cooking may be the realm for me. I'm not sure. It could just be because I've just started again, and I'm, you know, kind of in that excited sort of honeymoon stage. And, you know, that's a dangerous place, especially for someone with ADHD, because it's always super exciting for a certain period of time, and then it's not. But when I'm making good food, you know, it's nice. It's comforting. It's rewarding. And it's not prideful in some kind of, like, pride cometh before the fall type pride. It's like real pride. It's a real sense of accomplishment. You know, when I would dig into the custard and the pastry cream, it was like a reminder that this is good, that I didn't fuck it up, that I didn't burn it, I didn't scorch it, you know, that I can do good. That's a great feeling that I normally don't get. And I don't want to lose that. So yeah. Well, got some stuff I gotta do. It's encroaching on noon. I have an alarm that's gonna go off at noon. I would prefer that to not go off on my phone while it's recording. So I'm gonna be done. Have fun.